Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's well. Those of you that are live or will be joining us live, as well as those of you that are watching the recording, welcome. It's 12 minutes past. We'll start at quarter past. Hi, Tony. Just waiting for Mrs. Africa Cardles. Hi, Mrs. McCallum. I don't know if Mrs. Africa Cardles is being a bit shy this evening. Hello, ma'am Lazarus. How are you doing? Miss Lazarus, you know we're all tired this time of the evening, and there's a good chance some of us are still going to plan some lessons this evening still. It's good to have you here. Haven't you heard that they're cancelling the holiday, especially in the Western Cape, seeing that they wanted to make more time for maths and languages? Did they not publish that change yet? Miss Africa Cardles is just indicating she's struggling to get on. So we'll just give her another minute or so. Hello, Miss Miller. Always good to see you. Okay, we're still just waiting for Miss Africa Carls. She says she's on her way. Hi, Carla. Okay, for those of you that just joined now, I'm just waiting for Miss Africa Carls quickly. She's just struggling to get onto the link. If you just give us a minute or so, then we'll get started. Let's see if I can add this way. Okay, let's start the conversation. I will add Miss Africa Carls when she comes. So this evening we're going to chat about lesson structure, and whenever I have conversations with people about the topics we're going to discuss, I always ask myself, why do we want to have that conversation and why is it important? So the question is, why is lesson structure so important? And I think if we understand what our core purpose as teachers are, then the way we structure our lessons becomes something that we become intentional about. And what I mean by that is that our core business is learning. Learning and teaching are two very different things, and when we are focused on learning, what we are focusing on is the mastery of the learner. So then we ask ourselves, how do we structure our lesson in such a way that within that 40 to 50 minute period, the learner leaves with a level of mastery? We all know that we don't enter a classroom without planning for that lesson. So what we're speaking about this evening is how we can structure our lessons, but that will speak to how we plan for our lessons as well. So there's many different ways that you can structure a lesson, and then the importance of structuring a lesson helps us create almost like a repeatable formula, something that we can apply from one lesson to the next and not just in isolation. When we talk about lesson structure, we are referring to the way an educator plans the learning path of each learner in the class. So what journey am I going to take the learner on from the start of the lesson to the end of the lesson with a very specific objective? A basic lesson, whether you are intentionally planning for that lesson or not, a basic lesson could consist of you communicating the lesson objective. The teacher will have time to share the content and the knowledge and the skills. There will generally be like a question and answer session. There may be classroom discussions, and then we normally end off a lesson with an activity, a questionnaire, or something to that effect that the learner does independently. I think many times when we get to the end of the lesson, that independent activity, if it's not done in the class, is sent home for homework. And in the lesson structure we're going to speak about today, we're going to speak about how important it is that the learner also does independent work while they're still supervised by you as the teacher. Just checking again if Miss Africa Carlos is here yet. No. Okay, so the question then we then ask ourselves is, what is the best way to structure that lesson? We've got questions that we're going to ask. We've got a lesson objective that we want to share with the learners. We're going to have a classroom discussion. But how do we structure those things, and where do we place them within the lesson for them to be the most effective? So the lesson structure we're going to speak about today is referred to as I do, we do, you do. And those of you that have worked with me before, like Miss Miller, will know very much about I do, we do, you do. And the I do, we do, you do approach is also referred to as the gradual release of responsibility. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later on as well. Please, while we're having this conversation, please feel free to send me a message and maybe post a comment or a message in the group. And we will answer those questions. Miss Africa Carls has joined. She'll be popping up on our screen right now. Hello, Miss Africa Carls.
I made it. I made it. I tried to be fancy and use my laptop and it didn't work.
So we went to the phone. Welcome, ma'am.
Back to the basics.
So we started the conversation a little bit without you. I did a little bit of an introduction of what we're going to be speaking about lesson structure, and that we're specifically going to talk about the I do, we do, you do lesson structure, keeping in mind that there are various ways that you can structure your lesson, but that's the one we're specifically going to speak about this evening. And then I also ask those that are watching that if they have any questions to please just post it in the comments, and we will answer those questions as we go along. Miss Africa Carls, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your teaching history, and where you got doing?
I am Dawn Africa Carls. I've been teaching since, I see your finger, since 2001. I started teaching at a primary school in Delft, Roosendaal Primary, and it was such a good school, and I learned such good things there that I still have those concepts and ideas on school with me to this date. From there, I moved to Weltevreden Primary in Delft, actually Weltevreden Primary in Mitchells Plain. And I loved it there, but I was there only for 1 year. And then God decided I need to be at Wallasdean Secondary, which was at that time we were Hector Peterson. And I was there until 2006. And then I was part of the team that established Wallasdean Secondary in Wallasdean. And I was there until 2019. I was one of the desks and chairs. And it felt like home. And I thought I would never feel like home anywhere else. And then I applied to DISA. And now DISA is my home. So I started at DISA as one of the managers, but also as an Afrikaans teacher. And right now I'm more tasked with the thinking and planning for the school and for the teachers, and not necessarily with teaching any longer. And I see it as just having spread my reach from being in my class and touching the lives around me to touching all the kids all over the school, not touching them, like touching their lives all over the school. So that's where I am. I'm the principal of Dyser Primary. I had a principal before at Dyser Primary, and I learned a lot from that principal. And that principal is also now struggling with the gradual release of responsibility. He's really struggling with it, but he's doing well. He's doing really well. I'm so proud of him and even prouder of me.
For those of you that don't know, I poached Mrs. Africa Carls as my deputy about 2.5 years ago. She was my deputy, and now she runs the school that she kicked me out of, and doing a really good job at it. So, Ms. Africa Carls, tell us about I do, we do, you do. What does those very short but powerful terms mean, and what is the teacher doing and the learners doing during those parts of the lesson?
Okay. So the lesson structure for I do, we do, you do, shows that a lesson has three specific parts. There's the section where you enter and you introduce a concept, and that's the I do. That's where you do. At that time, the learner, the teacher is teaching and explaining a concept, and the learner is receiving the information. You would generally want them to sit quietly, don't make notes, just sit and listen. The next section, the next part would be the we do. And this is where you demonstrate with the learners these concepts that you were just teaching. And basically what it means in a language classroom, for example, you would have the sentence on the board and we would all work together to answer that sentence, and you would guide and you would help and you would assist. The you do is the bulk part of the lesson, and that is where the learner works independently in class while you are there. And traditionally, what happens is we go into a class and we talk and we talk and we talk and we talk, and some of us talk a little bit, and the kids get to do the homework at home. And now you get Johnny's mommy sending you a message tonight. Miss, Johnny didn't do his homework because he didn't understand. And you lie there flabbergasted and you say, I explained it and I asked, do you understand? And Johnny said, yes, I do understand. But Johnny doesn't know what Johnny doesn't understand until Johnny starts working independently. And this is true for all of us. It's true for everybody. You know it was like that for you in a classroom. So you want the child to be in that phase in your class while you're there, while you are facilitating, while you're moving around to see. And you would assign timestamps to it because it helps and it makes sure that you don't spend the bulk of the time talking and they are passive receivers of information, because I can promise you it's probably just flying past their ears.
Yeah. So, so, so when you're planning to implement the I do, we do, you do structure into your classroom, you would sort of plan for those three distinct sections in your lesson. What am I going to do as an educator? There's new knowledge, new skills, new concepts. I am going to transfer that knowledge using a PowerPoint, using a demonstration, whatever the case may be. In the second part is the we do part. Now we do this together. It's almost like now you've listened. Now I want to see
Exactly.
whether you are actually understanding the instructions I gave or the new concepts or skills that I gave. But I'm also giving the learner the opportunity to not feel like they must know it because I'm now there. We are doing this together. And then we've got the you do part where the modeling is all done. I've shown you how. I've shown you my thought process. I've shown you how you should think about the concept. Now let you
Let
work
you do this.
independently
Yes.
on the work. So you slowly moving through that process where you are taking in charge and you are the center of attention to where the learner is then the center of
Plus,
attention.
it's not a I'm done now. I can sit and relax. The kids are working. You are actively facilitating the learning process. Learning is taking place now. Where you are not the one working and speaking and doing everything on your own, that's where learning takes place. That's the golden hour. But you are still there. You are assisting them and you're making sure that they don't wander off. And when they get to that, if you challenge them enough to make them feel like I can do this, I can break this down, and I can do this, I can understand this, um, they want to learn. They don't have time to misbehave. They don't have time to be disruptive. They want to learn.
Mm. I think what's important that you noted there is that once the I do and the we do is done, it doesn't mean that your job is over. Actually, your job almost only starts that time,
Facts.
because now you're walking around the class, you're circulating, you're keeping learners on task. But I think most importantly, you're checking whether the learners understood what was done during the I do part and what was done during the we do part. And
That's
that
right.
is the tough part for us. I know as an novice teacher, after, say, for example, the period was 60 minutes, I spoke for about 40
55?
minutes in that lesson. That I do part was 40 minutes long,
Yeah.
and then it was just me talking. I was going to teach. I was the center of attention. I was new. I had PowerPoint, so I talked for 40 minutes. And now I give you an activity. You've got 20 minutes to do it. So what did I go and do? I went to go sit
Was
down
I tired?
and go do admin, go do whatever the case may be. Now you're on your own. I did my job for 40 minutes. Now it's your job. But I think as you move on your career, you start realizing that once your independent communication comes to an end, that's when your job starts to check whether the learners understood what you have
Fact.
taught them and try to convey to them. Because our job is not to teach, our job is to ensure that learning has taken place. And we have to go and check that has happened.
Fact.
Um, I believe that we must be intentional as educators, and that's why we must think about our planning and think about how we structure our lesson. When you structure your lesson in that manner, what is your desired outcome, whether that is for the class as a whole, for individuals, for yourself? What is your desired outcome by structuring your lesson in that way?
So, so I want the children to learn. I want to know what they've learned. I want to know whether they understood what I've tried to impart. And I want to know whether they can do it on their own. That's what I want to know. Then I know I've been successful because it's not about teaching only, it's about teaching and learning. So, what I do is I think about who is in front of me, who is my customer, who am I selling this to? What do I need to sell this? So I would set up my lesson and use ICT and use music and use whatever I need to. But I'm intentional in the fact that I want them to learn, and this is what I want them to learn. So when I go in, I put the outcome on the board, and I know this question is going to come up maybe later. Do you tell the kids, okay, this is the I do phase, and this is the we do phase, and this is the you do phase? Probably depending on the age of the learner. Perhaps with my grade 12s, I tell them, guys, this is now my part, so you need to listen and then. But with my grade 6s and my grade 7s, they don't need to know that. They just need to know what they need to know when they leave this room. So for today, we're working on this. You are going to know how to write a dialogue or how to identify a dialogue when we leave this room. That is on the board. Before we leave, I'm going to sign your book and I'm going to ask, like, you've got dialogues? And I want to know that you know this is what a dialogue looks like. This is what the dialogue is used for. And if I get that, then my lesson was successful.
How would you divide the percentage of a lesson into the I do, we do, and you do parts of the lesson? What would you say the proportion should be?
I would say if an hour lesson, I would spend 10 to 15 minutes on the I do. It's not about me talking and explaining the whole time. I would spend equal amount of time on the we do because now it's small activities and I've got the kids come up and it can take a long time. So you want to have a timestamp. You want to know it's only going to go up to this point and then you're going to start working on your own. I attended a workshop at Wallisdean Secondary years ago and Dr. Allan Clarke was there. And like He went through his explanation, and he went, okay, so now you guys start working. And I said, hey, I know you get paid a lot, man, for you to just say like 3 lines, 4 lines, and then we start working. He said, ma'am, if you're the one tired when you walk out of that class, you're doing it wrong. The kids should be working. The kids should be thinking. The kids should be engaged. So that's what you're aiming for. So the bulk of your time should be with the independent practice. Because while you're doing that independent practice looks different for a lot of people. The first 10 minutes you will probably be circling, and then you will start having your customers that are done, and you'll say, okay, come to the table, and I'll sign this, and I'll sign this, and I'll mark this for you. And kids are excited for you to mark it right there. So you could structure those activities in 10 mark blocks so that it's quick, but they've learned something. And while you go through that, when you pick up an error, because you'll see the first 3 learners or the first 9 learners have all made this mistake, then you can explain that to the whole class. So it's another learning opportunity, and it ensures that someone who hasn't even realized they didn't understand that gets that information knowledge as well.
I think that many times, and I experienced this as well, the reason why I maybe spoke for a very long time in a lesson is because I thought that when I spoke, I had control. The learners are less likely to misbehave.
Right.
They're less likely to be distracted by something because they're supposed to be listening to me while I'm speaking. And sometimes we struggle to just release that to the kids to be like, you need to work independently, because we're scared of not being able to control the environment because now the learners are working on their own. I am not holding their attention in front. And I think this is where the planning comes in. If you plan methodically and intentionally for those 3 parts within the lesson, then your kids should be busy from start to finish, and they shouldn't have time to misbehave and step out of line
Look,
and
make no
become a
mistake, there'll be a buzz. There'll be a buzz in the class, but it'll be a working buzz. And you won't mind that buzz. And it shouldn't rise over a certain point. If it does rise over a certain point, that means one of 2 things. The child who's making that, who's becoming too rowdy, is either finished already. This isn't a challenge. Give him another activity, or he didn't understand at all. So get him to your table, move him to your table, and say, okay, guys, the rest of you, you're going on. If you have any questions, come to me, put up your hand. And then you know your customers. You know who's that child that needs a little bit more. So you'll call him and say, come show me what you're doing. Write that first line. And now explain this line to me. And that's how you move him from you telling him what he hasn't done right to him seeing what he hasn't done right. And then learning has still taken place, you know?
um, Amanda Daniels made a very nice comment, and I like the word she used in there. She used the word mastered.
Mastered.
The comment is the you do would also give you an idea as to who has mastered the concept and who would need a follow-up lesson. And this helps you with your planning for your lessons to come. And I think the word mastered is so important there. Is because essentially that's also what we want from our kids, that they master whatever concept we have brought to the class for that day. And we have to check whether they mastered it. They didn't master it by just listening to us all the time. They mastered it by practicing and implementing it, and us checking that they've mastered it, and then allows us to make decisions for intervention, allows us to make decisions for how our next lesson is going to start, and so forth. In the post that you wrote for us, you made a statement that stuck out for me and that I haven't thought about until I read it. And the sentence read as follows. The idea is that learners do not find out what they don't know when they are at home, and you are not there to assist. You need to ensure that learners get the opportunity for independent practice while in class with you. What do you mean by this, and why is that important to you?
if you do not structure your lesson with timestamps properly, you are going to find that you've explained and made examples and had just a grand ball of a time in that class with your learners through the talking phase. And by the time it's time for them to start working, there's about 10 to 20 minutes, 15 minutes left of the lesson. They might be able, let's say they have to write a dialogue, they might be able just to write the introduction. And then when they get home, they're going to sit and wonder, does the dialogue get inverted commas? I can't remember. Was I put in inverted commas? I don't know. I'm just going to leave this. Or I'm going to write it the way I think it works, and I'm going to submit it, and I'm not going to score good marks. You want the child to work in the class. You want the child to find out what he doesn't know. It's not about seeing, they all got it. It's that opportunity, that golden hour for reteaching, while that information is still fresh, that happens then when they're working independently. So you want them to work through that activity or a number of activities in class while you're there so that you can explain if they need more information. You always want to be right there. You just want to strike where the iron is hot. You want to be right there when they find out. Ma'am, I can't remember. Ma'am, I don't know. Ma'am, what did you say about? Because that's what it starts sounding like when they start working independently. Ma'am, I can't remember. You said. So that's how you work through it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think when the learners work independently and they don't know and they start getting frustrated and there isn't someone to assist them and guide them through their misunderstanding, and many times the parents can't, it affects their confidence for that topic, it affects their willingness to get excited about the topic, and they're not going to come back to you tomorrow to to find out what is meant by that. All they're going to do is, ma'am, my homework's done, I'm allowed into the classroom. But if that's done in the classroom, there's an opportunity for correction, and we have facilitated mastery because that learner is going to leave the class being confident that they've made the mistakes when my teacher was there to correct them.
Can I say, sir, do you mind if
Sure,
I answer Mandisa? Mandisa sent a
sure.
comment to say, sometimes I cut short the process of you do because learners take it as a happy period. Mandisa, you need to, I would suggest that you structure the you do a little firmer, a little better. Have different types of activities and at different levels. So have an entry level activity. The minute they get that right, it pulls them in and they get excited about doing more, but also do not use the you do time to sit and mark or do something else. It is the time for you to move amongst your kids. If you move amongst your kids, you will have less kids acting and reacting out in class. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Africa Carlos. The I do, we do, you do is also referred to as the gradual release of responsibility model. And I think from having conversations with you, this is the part of the model that you enjoy the most.
Yeah.
Explain to us what that statement means, the gradual release of responsibility.
Okay, when we think about the gradual release of responsibility, it's all about the cognitive work. Where does it start out? At the beginning, I'm doing the cognitive work. So it's the I do. And what is the learner doing during the I do? He's listening. So he's actively listening. In my older classes, I would say we are active listeners. Make notes while we are going through so that we can discuss it when we get to the we do section. So you start out doing the cognitive work, doing the thinking, doing the explaining, doing the demonstrating. Then you start sharing that responsibility. So that gradual release, now we share the cognitive work. I'm thinking and you are thinking. I'm explaining while you come up with examples, while you come up with questions, because those questions demonstrate that you are interacting and engaging with this information. The final phase is where I hand over the responsibility of the cognitive work, not the lesson, not the working, not the class, the cognitive work, the thinking and engaging with this work. That is now your responsibility. You have this activity, and I wouldn't give kids 3 pages and say you got to work through the 3 worksheets. I'll give them the one, and you get the next one once you finish this one. So you can just put up your hand and say, I'm done. That's a quick check. I'm done with this one, and I'll slide the next one over to you. Everybody won't be done at the same time, so I'll be able to see whether you actually got it right, whether you mastered this, and how are you moving through. And I think something that you mentioned earlier, mastery, right? Mastery and reteaching. That's a golden combination. The child masters a concept, or he doesn't, and I reteach. And I find another way, and I find another way, and I find another way. But that handing over of the responsibility of thinking through this information, that's the GRR model. And then that's the part that I love. Because you can see when that child starts getting it and starts understanding and starts thinking independently. And that's awesome.
And I'm a firm believer of once you create structure, and the structure I'm talking about now is how I'm going to structure my lesson, right? I've created structure, I've created order, I know what's going to happen, I know how it's going to happen. What it allows me to do as an educator in that environment, as well as for the learners within that environment, it allows them to be creative. They need order to be creative within that order. They start to innovate within that order. They start the independent thinking, the lateral thinking within that order. So we also need to take responsibility of the structure that we create, which always is sort of your lesson structure and the learning path you're going to take them along. And once they feel that order and that structure, that's when their creativity comes, your creativity comes, your innovation comes. I've heard comments before about almost prescribing how people should structure a lesson, like in terms of the I do, we do, you do, that it stumps your creativity as an individual. So when it comes to the you do part, that just means, what am I going to do? No one's prescribing to you how you do the I do. The we do. No one's prescribing to you how to do the we do. You can do a turn and talk. You can do cold calling. Kids can come to the board. You can use whiteboards for learner responses. The how is endless. During the independent practice and the you do, there's so many different ways that you can allow the learners to work independently. It can be a crossword puzzle, can be a past paper, it can be a standard activity, it can be a group work activity. They are still working on their own. So the creativity still sits with you, and your personality still comes out in that lesson. You're just intentional about who is doing what at a very specific time. Gradually releasing that responsibility from me as the educator to the learner over the course of the lesson.
Awesome.
You look like you wanted to say something.
I think you need to repeat that. The fact that no, but it's powerful. It's you are still you. You still get to do it your way, but it is about a safe structure that you know within this lesson. I'm gonna move my child or these kids from this point to that point. And I see you, Mandisa. I see you with those 63 kids in the class. I see you. You've got this. It's not easy. I see you.
Paula Fulyun, for those of you that don't know her, she is a dance teacher. So some of our schools are very privileged to be art-focused schools. And Ma'am Carla is a dance teacher. If you've ever gone into Ma'am Carla's classroom, it's generally a wooden floor, mirrors all around the classroom, those ballet poles around the side. It's such an amazing environment to teach kids in. And I've watched her classes, how she just enjoys the kids in that space. But I'm happy that she can see that sort of structuring this, and I'm sure in a very practical subject like hers, the I do, we do, you do also works, because I'm going to show you a dance move. Don't do anything, just watch me. Watch my feet. Not that I can dance, guys. I'm very, very bad. So watch me do the move. Watch my feet, watch my hips, watch my arms, watch what my body's doing. Okay, let's do that together now. Okay, have you got this? Okay, let's do this again. We didn't get the feet right. Now I stand still and I walk around the class and you do it, and then I correct it. So the structure can transcend how practical or how theoretical the subject is. Carly, if I'm wrong, just tell me. Miss Africa Cardinals, do you have any? I think we've covered the topic quite extensively. Um, I think you've made it very practical for us, and I think in our mind's eye we can see it happening. Is there any last words from you around the lesson structure? Is there any words of encouragement from Ma'am Mandisa and her 63 kids?
Look, I'm gonna say don't discredit the use of ICT. Eh? Don't discredit the use of technology in a challenging classroom. Sometimes a challenging classroom could be 25 kids, depending on the makeup of the 25. I mean, I know this intimately. I've got awesome kids in my school in smaller classes, and using ICT will assist you. Kids respond to videos. I've seen a teacher a couple of weeks ago. I was on a school walk and I saw a teacher show recycling. And instead of saying, guys, we don't just throw everything, there's a landfill and it's just becoming more and more and more, and it's the environment. He was showing them what it looks like in those landfills. And we walked in, and it was a challenging class that the teacher had at that time. And I walked in, and they didn't even look up at this extra person strolling into the class and making notes and walking around because they were so focused and paying attention. Um, and what I do is I'm a language specialist. So I would have language classes and I would want to read for my kids because I am what is making that story come alive for them. Before I tell them, come now, you read for me. I need to read and just bring it out. So what I do is I'd record my reading so that because everybody who has ever read a text for a child knows you have to make eye contact, otherwise you lose them. But as soon as you make eye contact, you sometimes lose your train of thought, or you explain a concept and you lose your train of thought and you struggle to get back on. If you record, if you use something like Vocaroo and you do Book Creator and you record your reading, you can pause and explain and go back and you can just continue, and it's a smooth flow. But what I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, is this. Ons tree in die bresse in Afrikaans. We stand in the gap between having a community that's going to wait for a handout for the rest of their lives and having people who are able to create and make and do for themselves. Never underestimate how important you are. Yes, there are digital schools in the world. Yes, there are schools that have all the facilities and the resources, but I have never seen a computer replace me at my best. I can't see it happening to you. Do what you love and love who you're doing it for. Love your kids. Start there. Start by loving your kids with everything in you and with everything in them, with every little aspect, every niggle, every irritation, everything about them. It'll help you through the difficult days because there'll be difficult days and there'll be hard times. But we do this because we believe in the learner's ability to learn. Structure your lesson so that you know when the kids leave your room, they've learned, not you've taught. teaching methods change and teaching content changes. And then this year, your principal says, or your SMT says, you are teaching Afrikaans FAL. And next year, they say, you are now teaching life orientation FAL and NS. You know nothing about teaching subjects, content, and methods change. What doesn't change is that you are going to go in there, you need to teach, but more importantly, they need to learn. And remember, Maya Angelou said, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Thank you, boss.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Africa Carls. Thanks to everyone that joined us this evening, and for those that's going to watch this recording. Next week is a surprise.
Ooh.
So I'm not going to tell you what the topic is for next week and who we're going to have a conversation with. It's a surprise. Maybe the surprise is that there's no video next week. But everyone have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your week. It's almost school holidays. And keep well.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Mr. Rigour.